Welcome to the Dave Heiner Community Diner. The Dave Heiner Community Diner was created to share information with our peers, with the engineers we support, the facilities we support, and the proactive contractors. Here at the Dave Heiner Community Diner, we promote advances in water and wastewater treatment, industrial discharge treatment, and we're hoping that today's presentation is going to show you that. We're going to start off with, we're privileged to represent Pulsafeeder, and this young lady is our regional manager for the Pulsafeeder Engineered Products Group.
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Valerie Sutton. I'm the Eastern Regional Sales Manager for Pulsafeeder, headquartered in Rochester, New York. On behalf of Pulsafeeder, I'd like to welcome you to the second installment of the Dave Heiner Community Diner Lunch and Learn. Pulsafeeder is pleased to support this month's topic, Disinfection Efficacy. Before I turn it over to our presenter, I'd just like to express my heartfelt thanks to the water and wastewater professionals who keep our plants running to supply clean water to our homes and businesses. Thank you for the work you do. And now, without further ado, please sit back and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Valerie. We're really privileged to have Valerie. She's been with Pulsafeeder for decades. Again, today's topic is Disinfection Efficacy, a Dave Heiner legacy. The manufacturers that we are going to focus on today are the master company, Pulsafeeder and Pulsatron, Moino, Blaco, Grifco, and DMP Corporation. Disinfection is practiced at every wastewater treatment plant and industrial facilities, not so much petrochemical or power. That is more of a biofouling control application. But if you're a food manufacturer, meat packer, produce packager, you disinfect too. And if you disinfect, you need to deal with the product that you're sending to the receiving stream. If your discharge goes to a wastewater treatment plant, consult, I'm sure you don't have to because they've already talked with you, your regional sewage authority for the requirements dedicated to your facility. So again, disinfection is used for wastewater and industrial discharges requiring reduction of pathogens. Disinfection should not be confused with sterilization. Disinfection is the process designed to lower, inactivate most microorganisms and bring them to an acceptable number. Disinfection, again, is not sterilization. Sterilization is the removal and destruction of all living microorganisms. So the closest you get to sterilization, unless you are sterilizing in your home, is your potable water supply, because your potable water supply has been treated to remove all of that microbiological life. That's why when you get your water report, you might see my water authority generally has one violation a year, and it's generally one fecal, one indicator organism per 200 milliliters, per 100 milliliters. In wastewater treatment plant, generally wastewater treatment plants are to get the indicator organism down to 200 colonies per 100 milliliters. So today, we are going to talk about disinfectants, but we're going to focus on sodium hypochlorite, and then we're going to also focus on dechlorination. But just so you're aware, elemental chlorine, being chlorine in cylinders, ton containers, rail cars, is still practiced in the center of the country and outside of the United States. It is the least expensive means. However, due to safety concerns, New Jersey with the TCPA law, Toxic Catastrophe Prevention Act, and California and the Western states with the Uniform Fire Code greatly limited the amount of liquefied gases you could have on hand. Just a little history. So sodium hypochlorite, which we refer to as bleach, calcium hypochlorite, which you may use in your swimming pool, ultraviolet disinfection, ozone, potassium permanganate, bromine products, peracetic acid, and other products are also disinfectants that are used. However, sodium hypochlorite is the most widely used product throughout the world. Now, due to chronic and acute toxicity levels of chlorine and chlorinated byproducts, the practice of chlorination has got to be optimized. The more you optimize it, the more you're going to reduce the required dosage for sodium bisulfite dechlorination before your effluent leaves your plant. So what is disinfection efficacy, other than a great term that Chuck came up with? Disinfection efficacy is efficiency and effectiveness. I think we're all trying to be as efficient and effective as we can be, but you can have one and not have the other. The idea is to be efficient and effective. I can be the most efficient person in the world, but be ineffective. So efficiency is add only enough sodium hypochlorite to get the job done. Do this by responding to changes in flow and demand. This will minimize the need for dechlorination and add both chemicals in the most efficient manner. Effectiveness, you want to reduce pathogens below your NPDES or SPDES limit. I mean, that's what you're doing. You want to get those pathogens down to an acceptable level. Well, chlorination dosages will result in lower dechlorination requirements. However, you've got to inactivate those pathogens to an acceptable number. We're pleased to tell you that the majority of facilities that have applied the technology we are going to share with you are lowering their chlorine dosages by 20 to 50% or greater. And of course, if you lower your chlorination dosages, you will lower dechlorination requirements, which will save you money. And ultimately, your effluent will have less impact on the receiving waters. It's not that large, but if you were to feed a part per million excess bisulfite, you could lower your dissolved oxygen by 0.25 parts per million. So how do we do this efficiently? Well, we don't do it with a diffuser. Quite frankly, diffusers are fantastic. Most engineers do a great job designing these to span the entire channel width in an event to effectively apply the chemical across the entire flow of the channel. However, as you can see in our diffuser picture, there are many, many, many holes in a diffuser because that's what it does. It diffuses. The engineering of it is extremely involved so that you design a quantity of holes, a diameter of holes, that you will diffuse across the whole basin. It's great. We've all been to plants where they don't have a diffuser. They've got a chlorine discharge line just hanging in the beginning of chlorine contact, or they even drip it onto the surface, which is extremely ineffective. But diffusers are not the way to go. The master company and other manufacturers, and right now I'd like to give credit, and by saying that the master company did not invent this technology. However, at Dave Heiner Associates, and I believe at our customers' facilities, you would agree that they have perfected it. And the reason I say that is the whole idea of chemical induction is to get the chemical in contact with the majority, if not all, of the flow as soon as possible. In sodium hypochlorite addition, this is at the beginning of chlorine contact. Every disinfectant has a CT value. A CT value is the value based in time, based in dosage, of how long it takes historically to inactivate, to reduce microorganisms. What the master company did was they designed a device that had a distributor to distribute the sodium hypochlorite. And to get a little bit ahead of myself, also sodium bisulfite, and we can talk about that. What I want to share with you is how we do this. These mixers operate at 1,750 RPMs. And what we do is we create an induced vortex fluid movement that travels, your process water travels up into the distributor, and then it is distributed out the side in an effective radius that is designed for the geometry of your channel. If you've got a 4-foot channel and low flow, you're going to need less horsepower than you would with a 12-foot channel. When you distribute the chemical, you are placing it about at a 180-degree distribution angle. That means literally you're going out on a right angle all the way around the mixer to the walls of your chlorine contact basin. Now, the system is designed so that there is a diameter in feet that we want to cover. And yes, we know the channels are generally rectangular, so we take that into account. Excuse me. And in the development of this mixing zone, there is also a girth, a height to it. If you would, imagine the mixing zone as a giant donut for a nanosecond. And then that giant donut collapses upon itself because the flow is coming directly at the face of the mixer. If you have an inordinately wide channel, we can address that too. The majority of the applications that we've been involved with, you can get by with one chemical induction unit. If you have an extremely wide channel, like some of our friends at a facility that we provided this equipment recently, you may need 2 mixers. And that system is designed in such a way that those 2 mixers will apply the chemical across a very wide channel. The system is designed to be ergonomic for the operators. We assume a vertical orientation as the unit is brought up for service or inspection, and as it travels down its guide rails to its application point. As you saw in the previous diagrams, the application point is at the center line of the level of the water in the channel. Now, we talked about applying the chemical at the point of application. How do you get there? Well, Dave Heiner Associates is pleased to represent Pulsafeeder, and you met Valerie Sutton earlier in this presentation. Pulsafeeder has been the predominant chemical metering company since probably a little bit after World War II. Prior to Pulsafeeder, Milton Roy was extremely active. Pulsafeeder has, of course, the traditional diaphragm-actuated metering pumps. We're pretty excited here about the Eclipse pump, which is an external magnetically driven gear pump. The Eclipse could potentially help your application in that it does not use check valves. We're not doing a sales presentation, but the cool thing about this is no check valves and no need to disconnect your piping if you need to service the pump's working end. This is Pulsafeeder's auto degassing valve. Thank you for attending that short video. In addition to the Pulsafeeder line, we represent Moino. Progressing cavity pumps have become fairly popular too, due to the off-gas issue with some chemicals. A chemical metering system can only be as good as the entire system. This gives you a good system overview, and we are pleased to tell you that we represent companies that support that or are pleased enough to incorporate them and work with them into our systems, because the system is what it's all about. Blaco is the world leader in pulsation dampeners, surge suppressors, inlet stabilizers. If you have a chemical head on your inlet of your pump that's too high or too low, diaphragm seals and valves, and leak containment. Blaco has a great video if you want to visit their website to show you what a pulsation dampener does. And happy to give a plug to Blaco. Next slide. Grifco, another company we're proud to represent for the accessories, the ancillary equipment that really makes this system work well and be trouble-free for you. That includes back pressure valves, which double as anti-siphon valves, pressure relief valves, calibration columns, injection valves. Corporation stops and injection valves are used when you're doing pipeline injection. And we can discuss that, and gauge guards. Lastly, we're pleased to represent DMP Corporation. I say this for the industrial participants because DMP Corporation can take a look at your industrial discharge, and if it's a problem with pH, if it's a problem with high BOD, if it's a problem with solids, whatever the problem could be, they will design a turnkey system for you, such as you see here, that can be installed and operating fairly quickly in a collaboration between you, industrial facilities or municipal facilities, and DMP, with nobody in between. So after all of this information, I know, because when I first learned about this back in the 70s, I was confused, I was baffled, and I immediately got out the George Clifford White's Handbook of Chlorination and read that religiously in my library on the lower level of my home. Well, hopefully with the information that we've provided today, you won't be intimidated. Chemical feed is fairly straightforward. We're privileged to have a number of manufacturers that have been doing this a long time. So don't be intimidated because Dave Heiner Associates has a staff of people that are well-versed in this application, as well as many, many other applications, which we're hoping you will help us focus on. So we started at the end today. You know, I started with the influence of effluents, but now we got to kind of go back to the beginning, which thanks to Teledyne ISCO, I'm calling the inference of influent. Teledyne ISCO has been very, very prominent, active, proactive in the COVID-19 dilemma, tracking, trending of the COVID virus in the influent going into our wastewater treatment plants has become invaluable.
Very nice job, Chuck.
Thank you, David, and thank you for the privilege of representing your product.
Yeah, we're always trying to enhance our products, and I know that in New York you like to use the non-vacuum style distributor, which you would recognize like this. We're working on a hybrid between the distributor and our propeller style, and it's a new shape. It will have the radial dispersion like the distributor, with less potential fouling issues, and we think we might be able to get a higher dispersion rate from that. So I'll be introducing maybe a new data sheet for that before long, and potentially a prop for you to test at one of the plants.
You're always thinking. David's come up with some really cool inventions. One of the inventions that I really was impressed with was a flume for disinfection of water naturally utilizing the sun, UV, in countries that don't have power. So David, you're a great asset to us, and you're a great humanitarian. Thank you. We have a question.
What are some of the cost savings that have been realized by facilities that we've applied our systems to?
That's a great question. Who asked that question? Okay. Very good question. If you want a formula to put in your hip pocket, put this formula in your hip pocket. And if you write to me, if you contact us via our website, I'm happy to give you all these magic formulas because that's how I made it through Calculus 1, 2, and 3, memorizing all those theorems. If you take the plant flow in MGD, so let's use an example, 10 MGD. 10 times 8.34 is 83.4 gallons per day of 12.5% sodium hypochlorite. So just let's round that up to 85 for my simple mind. So if you're a typical wastewater treatment plant, a 10 MGD average flow, and not that every plant is typically that, you are applying 85 gallons per day of sodium hypochlorite for every part per million dosage. What does this mean? It means right now you're probably feeding 3 to 5 parts per million of sodium hypochlorite. So let's take the middle of that and call it 4. So 2 times 85 is 170, and 2 times 170 is 340. 340 gallons per day of sodium hypochlorite. So going back to the beginning, if you saved 1 part per million, you would save 85 gallons per day at roughly $1.10 to $1.20 per gallon of 12.5% sodium hypochlorite. Don't forget, if you have to dechlorinate, now you're going to save on sodium bisulfite, which is at the end of chlorine contact. So if you take those numbers that we just discussed, and you're a 100 MGD facility, now you're adding 850 gallons per day of sodium hypochlorite for each part per million dosage. That means that you are adding 3,400 gallons per day of sodium hypochlorite at $1.10 to $1.20 a gallon. So now cut that number by an average of 20, and I'm being extremely conservative there, to 50%. The majority of plants we've been pleased to work with are saving 30% on their hypo. And of course, downstream, they're saving even more money because their sodium bisulfite dosage goes down. Those are real numbers. I had a privilege of working with a plant chief at a New York City DEP facility. And he told me once back in 2003 that he literally paid for his chemical induction unit every month and a half. How often do you get a payback of every month and a half? That is phenomenal. Plus, you're helping the environment because the latest facility that we've had the privilege to work with, who we hope to feature down the road and potentially help them co-author a white paper, is saving 50% of what their sodium hypochlorite dosage previously was. Those are real numbers. Plus, they reported to us that their fecal coliforms were single digits. So a facility that has a NPDES or an SPDES permit of 200 colonies per 100 milliliters of the indicator organism is putting out 8 colonies per 100 milliliters. To me, that is an opportunity to apply equipment, but also help the environment. And again, the downstream dosage of any dechlorinating agent is reduced substantially because you're only treating the amount of remaining chlorine residual.
Chuck, you might also comment that chemical reduction, you have to consider, especially in New York, the DEP, for that chemical to truck into the city, it's considered a hazardous chemical.
Correct.
So if they can reduce that by half, you're reducing risk. There's other costs associated other than just the chemical, cost per gallon. So,
Dave, thank you so much for bringing that up. We mentioned calcium hypochlorite. Calcium hypochlorite is a dry chlorine product, and many facilities, particularly out in Long Island, are feeding calcium hypochlorite with the intention that it is a safer product. And this would be another topic we could discuss at another point. But the point is, what Dave says is, Dave, what's the average gallons of a trailer? I think it's 90,000 or something like that, a trailer of sodium hypochlorite. It's a lot of hypo. So if you're in a neighborhood that this truck comes through, you may be concerned about a chlorine leak. That's what started the whole trend to go from elemental chlorine to sodium hypochlorite. And as David says, the risk of an unintentional release of sodium hypochlorite is substantial in some areas. So if you're reducing your usage, you're reducing the amount of deliveries. Great point, David. Thank you. Any other questions? Looks like was that all three questions, sir? Okay. Oh,
my bad. Yeah, it was just couldn't get a question.
okay. Okay, folks. Thank you so much. Please tell your friends, tell your peers, tell your engineers, tell everybody that cares about the environment or is involved in this industry that the Dave Heiner Community Diner is here for you. Please visit us. We're on a number of social media vehicles, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Linky Dinky as I like to call it, Facebook, YouTube, and more to come. And don't forget to visit our website, and we will give away a few swag bags. So how are we going to do that, Miss Producer? Out of the interest of fair play, simply reply via our website, and we will provide swag bags to individuals who provide good questions, good comments. By all means, visit the website. It could be very profitable to you. And if I can, Drew, in case you guys haven't seen it, this is the Dave Heiner Associates swag bag. And we've got a couple for distribution right now for people that were kind enough to invite us to their facility. The last conference we participated in where we could do this in person at the conference was the New York Water Environment Association conference at the Marriott Marquis in New York City. So Drew, if you would, I'll stay here. So look for the survey, should be coming your way. Visit the website. There's always something new and exciting to see there. And be safe, be smart, but please be involved. Thank you.
That concludes our luncheon for today. I'd like to thank you all for attending. We look forward to hearing your feedback. Please join us for next month's luncheon.